A pretty significant number of Pokemon from Generation 5 may seem kind of familiar to experienced players. They don't necessarily look like Pokemon we already know, but they certainly have enough in common to remind us of some. I've already talked about Roggenrola being a lot like Geodude and Stalk and Throw being a lot like Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee, but really there was a lot more. And I'm not even talking about the tropes that we see all the time, like the early game rodents and birds, or the electric rodent, or the fossils. But there's a lot of Pokemon with very similar origins, like Munna and Drowsy, or Pokemon that have a similar role in the games, like Audino and Chansey, or Fungus and Voltorb. There's Pokemon that function similarly in other ways too, like Timburr and Machop, or Blitzel and Ponyta, or Pokemon that just look similar, like Tympole and Poliwag, or Bouffalant and Tauros. It's pretty clear that Game Freak was designing new Pokemon for existing concepts. It was like an homage to those Pokemon, and also an opportunity to redo some designs. A lot of fans, including myself at the time, weren't too pleased about it because it seemed unoriginal. But Gen 5 was not the first time that they did something like that. The idea of refreshing old designs is perfectly natural. You have to consider that with each generation, the tools for the creature designers get better and better. In Gen 1, they only had a 56 pixel square box and tones of gray to work with, so most of the designs were simple and only used one color. In Gen 2, they had 2 colors per sprite, so that's already a lot more variety that you can have. In Gen 3, the sprite size went up to a 64 pixel square, and they had a lot more colors to work with. Then in Gens 4 and 5, the sprite size went up again. In Gen 6 and 7, they had full 3D models, allowing the Pokemon to be progressively more detailed. And keep in mind too that artists are very bad at being happy with their own work long term. You might be happy with it for a few days, weeks, months even. But give it a few years, especially if you have to look at those designs every day, and you'll definitely be thinking, man, I could do so much better nowadays. So to me, it's perfectly natural that they would want to do over some designs, and this might have happened as early as Gen 2. That's when we got the original baby Pokemon. Some might have given existing designs maybe a bit more backstory, like Pichu making the mascot turn out to be an evolved Pokemon, or some might have given a new twist to some designs, like Tyrog tying Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee together. And we also got some new evolutions, like Blissey and Kingdra, that gave a little more complexity to the designs. But some of those might have been planned for Generation 1 and been cut, so it's a bit hard to tell. In Gen 3 they went for a fresh start, so they didn't really redo much besides adding 2 new baby Pokemon, but in Gen 4, you could really tell that they were trying to do more with some designs. There were a few new baby Pokemon and a ton of new evolutions. Look at Yanmega or Rhyperior and try to imagine how they would have looked in the generations of their pre-evolutions. You just could not fit that level of detail. But it was after Generation 5 that they really doubled down on refreshing old designs, because they found ways to revise some designs without actually making new Pokemon entirely. In Gen 6, we got Mega Evolution. It's no accident that Gens 4 to 6 together only make up about 15% of all Mega Evolutions. Those were recent generations, so there wouldn't have been as many designs that they wanted to redo. Not enough time had passed for those generations to feel outdated. Although it is surprising that Gen 3 had the most Megas, with about 41%. I would have expected Gens 1 and 2 to have the most. But in the Gen 7 games, the original Pokemon did have another shot at getting redesigned. That was when they introduced Alolan forms, and all of them were Pokemon that we originally met in Kanto. And Alolan forms work really well because they let the creature designers get really creative. Whereas Mega Evolution only applies to the final stages, and most of them give the Pokemon a tougher look, Alolan forms can be anything. I've said it before that I think Alolan Executor is what Executor would have looked like all along if they could have made it fit. But then there's also Meowth that were bred differently, Cubone that adapt to their volcanic environment when they evolve, or Vulpix that are based on an Arctic fox instead of the red fox. So if Game Freak have been refreshing designs all along, how come Generation 5 gets all the hate for it? And I think that's because it's the only one where the redesign isn't obvious. I mean, baby Pokemon, new evolutions, Megas, Alolan forms, they all redo a Pokemon design, yeah, but they're still related to that original design. They're all variations on that Pokemon. On the other hand, the repeats from Gen 5 don't make that connection obvious. When Game Freak introduced a baby Pokemon, it's like they're saying, look at this cute take on Mr. Mime. Or for an Alolan form, it might be, hey, what if Sandshrew lived on icy mountains instead of deserts? It clearly relates it to something we already know. With the ones from Gen 5 though, it's more like they're just saying, look at this cool new Pokemon, but when you see it, you go, well, hang on, that's just another Tentacool. It feels dishonest almost, like they didn't want to tell you that they were redoing that design. Anyway, that's how I see this whole in-canon redesign thing. There's nothing wrong with doing it, just make sure you're doing it right. But what do you think? Do you mind the Gen 5 do-overs? Do you think the approach to all the other kinds of redesigns is better? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe if you're new here. I'm Umbreon Libris, and I'll see you in the next chapter.